Yeah, let's start. So that's the agenda of today. So I'm going to explain a little bit about what I do personally in the company. Then I'm going to give you a little glimpse of what commercial space means today and what's going on there for the people like us, so who are not government people or who are not scientists or engineers. So what private companies are doing in that field, and then why there's a lot of excitement around space industry right now. So what's going on there and what drives that revolution, what drives the growth of the industry. And the main topic that I wanted to talk about today, like the goal of today's video, is to try to find our space within the space industry. Right? So how the space industry intersects with what we know and what we're excited about already. So we're talking about all this stuff, Internet of Things and VR, AR, and internet, sharing economy, all of that. So those are the topics that surround us. If you go to try this, it's everywhere, right? So I wanted to, the goal of the meeting today is to find intersections, basically, with what we know and what's going on in this industry. And then I'll just quickly make a glimpse of, give you a glimpse of what's going on here in UAE, because I'm involved with that as well. So let's start. So a few words about what we do as a company. So the company is called Precious Payload. As I said, it's a US-based startup because, again, this market is really regulated, and there's a lot of stuff that has to be taken care of, even if you're just doing the software. So being a US company makes your life much easier because you have bigger and access to a bigger market, but at the same time you can easily navigate the regulation because the bureaucracy has to be there. If you're in a country like UAE where there's no regulation, no licensing, it's actually bad, it's not good, because you can't present yourself to the foreign companies and say, okay, give me your information. They will say, how are you licensed? You say, I don't have any license, right? So it's really you have to be in the right bureaucratic situation, either in Europe or in the US to work in this field. But we all know that to register a US company today, it's a matter of a few clicks. Right? You can get yourself a US company really easy on the website without having to visit the United States at all. So to make it, again, really short, what we're building is basically a freight forwarder. We're all familiar with the concept of freight forwarder, someone who helps you organize a shipment from A to B. So we took the same concepts. We had different approaches, we called ourselves Expedia for space launches, Uber for space launches, whatever, because that was the easiest comparison that people came up with. But then the closest comparison that we got was a company called Flexport. So Flexport is a Silicon Valley startup that created the software and then the freight forwarder that makes the shipping with the ships, with the container, more efficient. Right? So they developed the software that lets you organize this space in the most efficient way. So basically do the same. This is an image on rockets. We basically do the same concept and said we're using software technology and standardization and automation to optimize packing of the satellites inside the rocket. So basically it's very similar. Basically, you have a rocket, you have a space within it. This space can be occupied by paying customers, and today the problem is that up to 50% of that space is unutilized. So you can see that this is a satellite, this is all unutilized. So the question is how to make a system, a software, that lets you know what space is available in the rockets around the world, in China, in India, in Europe, in the United States, and Russia, and then buy the space and launch your satellite. And that was the basic idea that came to us with my business partner 2 years ago. And today we have paying customers, we have exclusive deals to sell the rockets from different launch companies, and it's all growing. So we found our niche, we found a problem which is solved with the software, so happy. It's really exciting. So yeah, but today I didn't want to like dedicate the majority of time to speak about my company. I wanted to talk about commercial space. So the first question is, what jumps to your mind when you think about commercial space? Like what space companies do you guys know besides SpaceX?
Yeah, Virgin Galactic.
Okay,
Blue
good one.
Origin.
Virgin is here, so you cheated.
What?
You cheated because it's here.
I thought that was Virgin Galactic.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. That's why I was like, yeah, obviously Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin.
Planetary resources, deep
Alright.
space industries.
Okay, asteroid mining companies. Yeah, cool. Anything else?
SpaceX.
Come on.
That's the only one.
Roscosmos.
Okay, Roscosmos. Roscosmos is not the commercial company, but okay, it's a space company. Good. Okay, what government companies do you guys know? Roscosmos is the one. What's NASA? Okay, so Indian Space Research Organization, which is the Indian government space agency. Cool.
ITU, International Telecommunication Union. That's in
But
general
it's a union.
Switzerland. Yeah.
It's the industry union, so it's
It's kind of regulating
Yeah.
body of the space.
yeah, it's for the spectrum, but yeah, it's a good example. Yeah,
Mexico has a space program, right?
yeah, they do. They do it in partnership with the United States, but yeah, they do. Yeah.
I don't know what it's called.
Me neither. Cool, great. So obviously, the thing is, why do we know Virgin, Blue Origin, and SpaceX is because those were created by the billionaires. There's maybe already 3 or 5 books dedicated to like space barons, space billionaires, because those are basically individuals that created the companies on their own, right? So they said, I managed to get a fortune, I want to throw my space company. And that's how we know these 3 companies. There has been a lot of other ones, but we didn't know anything about them because they failed. Those 3, the Origin, Space, and Virgin, are still there. Then they're not yet profitable, but they're still being funded by the billionaire founders. That's why we still know. And there's a lot of other ones that nobody cares about already. Yeah. Cool. That's great. Okay, so that's an interesting image. So if you look at this graphic, it shows the influx of equity investments into the space industry from 2009 to present. So you can see that the very first commercial private space companies were created in 80s, and there has been some funding there. So some companies were doing some stuff there. But then it seems like it all started here in 2009. So from 2009 to 2018, there were $16 billion invested by angels, venture capital firms, private equity firms in the 375 new startups, right? So the question is, what do you think has happened here? Any clues? Like in this particular moment, 2009, what has happened? Do you have any idea?
SpaceX happened there.
Okay, you have to shut down. Because it seems like okay, yeah, you're right. So what happened here is SpaceX made the first successful commercial launch. So they were doing, in this decade from 2000 2009, they were trying to build the first commercial rocket in the remote islands in the Pacific Ocean, and nobody cared. Like literally, they were 3 rocket explosions. Nobody cared. They said this guy, he spent his fortune on some stuff, Elon Musk, and he was shipping the rocket parts from California to that island on his private jet. So everyone thought he's just crazy. And then what happened is that in 2009 they launched a satellite of this size, so like 50 kg satellite for the, I guess it was Malaysian customer, and they were paid. They were paid like $25 to $30 million, and everyone understood that it can be done. Like a lot of things can be done, and it can be done in a cheaper way, and it's not the playground of the government agents. There's something. So people started to invest. They started to invest. First, it was also just a bunch of people from the venture capital firms from Silicon Valley, and then it got really big. So we're now like we predict that this stuff is going to grow even bigger. And then of course we all know that venture capital firms they're looking for profitability, they're looking for exits. There won't be exciting exits here. It's so really long. So all the VCs they expect that if they put money here, then they're supposed to exit in maximum 7 to 9 years. So when they want to see that exit, this is going to go down. But now we have a good runway for the bubble to grow a little bit more. So now it's actually, I would say, it's a pretty fun time. So I always try to compare it to Bitcoin because Bitcoin had the same growth, in the accelerated pattern. So we're now, if you remember when Bitcoin was 17 or 20,000, I guess we're now like Bitcoin of $7,000-8,000. So there's a room to grow. Then it's going to crash. I hope not, but I don't know. It seems like when you look at what venture capitalists sometimes invest into, like Astrolabs, it really becomes really questionable on whether we are at the end of this bubble or just in the middle. But anyway, yeah. So I wanted to show you a short video that will give you a glimpse of what it feels like inside of this community. So maybe you've already seen it, but I wanted to share it again. For just a minute. So that's February 2018. Anyone knows what's going on?
Birds they're flying up there.
Yeah. So that's the largest rocket in the world, the most powerful one currently, that was developed using only private money. So no government contracts, no nothing. So this thing can lift the Boeing 737 with a passenger luggage, and it can fit actually the whole plane. So the first payload for this rocket was the first launch of this rocket. It was experimental. So launched the car, So why is it important? For two reasons. The first one, which is even not related to the technology or usability or whatever, is the media event. That thing generated, I don't know, maybe 25 to 30 million views on YouTube, and it was on the amount of the live subscribers to that event. It was beaten only by that Red Bull jump of the... Yes, exactly. So a lot of people compare that to the fact of Apollo days in 1969, and it was the moon landing. So I think that one launch maybe contributed to that investment bubble. I don't know, 15-20%. Because yeah, and then obviously, so first effect is the media one. Second effect is obviously usability. I'm going to talk about what drives this pollution. So what keeps people investing into the space one? What keeps people like applying their jobs there and starting the companies and coming up with crazy ideas? Why it's all happened with SpaceX and what else has contributed to that pollution? So obviously, one thing that is completely not related to the rockets and SpaceX is that we now have iPhones, right? So you know that this is the iPhones that we have are more powerful than the computers that we had in 90s, 2000s, and 80s, right? So we can fit the power of the personal computer from 90s in the pocket phone, right? So the idea back in the 2000s came that why didn't we try to use the same technology that is now being developed in America, and China, and everywhere? Why don't we take call it off-the-shelf commercial electronics, put it in a satellite, and launch it to space? And because before, all the satellites used to be like that, so it's 5, 6, 7 tons, big stuff. It looks like a gigantic computer with all the different technology. It costs $300 to $500 million that it used to be in the past. So that's the telescope, basically, for the Earth observation, used in agriculture in 2002. I think it was launched in 2004. That's the last version of it. And then these are satellites that are doing the same business function. So they are doing the Earth observation, and their dimensions are this. So they're basically 34 centimeters by 10 by 10. So they do the same function. Obviously, the resolution here is much greater, but those are being launched in hundreds. So this is the Silicon Valley startup. They came up with this idea that why don't we launch the satellites like iPhones? Why don't we launch 10 satellites, call them 1.0, send them to space. Some of them will fail, some of them will work. We'll learn from that. Next month we'll launch 1.1 version, and then vice versa. We'll upgrade them to new hardware, to next iteration, and launch them. So they came up with this agile technology in the satellite development, and they've been doing that for a number of years with one goal. They wanted to lower the cost of access to space, lower the cost of particular satellites, and then they were able to manufacture those satellites for less than $250,000. So this is $500 million. One of those is the size of a shoebox, and it costs $250,000. And they've launched 250 of them. But we'll get back to that company a little bit later. And so those satellites are called CubeSats. You can see that they have this rectangular shape. So they follow the standard code called CubeSats, and that's also the standardization. So the electronics got cheaper and smaller. You can use off-the-shelf electronics that we use in phones. And someone went out there and created the standards. They said, let's agree that we want to build this stuff, which has ridiculous shape. Let's agree that small satellites will follow the same patterns that will also make the life easier and make the integration easier, and a lot of things will become cheaper.
What's the name of that company? Planet Labs?
It's called Planet. They have a website called planet.com. Yeah, and their goal is to, they wanted to take the pictures of every place on Earth every day. They accomplished that last year. So now they even, in the populated areas, they can give you the images twice a day.
Wow.
And then their business model is basically they're creating the artificial intelligence or machine learning software that gets you insights from a particular area. They're saying that I've been monitoring that for like 500 days, and now I know the pattern of what's going on here. So I know the traffic of the ships, traffic of the cars, and they're trying to make sense out of it. But yeah, we can get back to that thing. But yeah, good. If you have any questions in the middle of the discussion, then please do so.
I have a question. It might be a dumb question, but I mean, I know $250,000 is a huge price cut from $300 million, which I have no idea exactly what it's cost. But still, it is a very big price tag for something that small, and especially if they're using off-the-shelf electronic components. So why are they so expensive?
It's mainly because of the requirements. So because it's how do you call it? It's the low. You make them in low numbers, low quantities. You have to build them manually with high-skilled engineers, and inside is clean room. So clean room is obviously not something you can those. In office space, you have to have a lab, right? You have to have a staff trained to work in that lab. But I'll give an example. There's a spaceflight laboratory in University of Toronto. They have a commercial non-for-profit company, and they have this faculty university. Every student that goes there for the master's program for 2 years, as a part of their education, will launch a satellite as a team, but it's there. So they made this educational student satellites. I guess their cost is without even without funding from the government. I guess it's less than 100K because they are doing this demo payloads. And one of the satellites in United Arab Emirates was built by SFL in Toronto, and now they want to do the same here in UAE. So they want the local students to be able to launch a satellite while they are studying at university. You know, for example, I'm from Russia. We had kind of same stuff. Like you go on your 4th year of education in university. They assign you to the lab. You go there. And they're saying, listen, we're building a satellite for the last 18 months. You're going to contribute to a battery there. And you work there for 6 months. You do nothing, right? They're saying, secret satellite, you know, there's a battery, you have to work in it. You're a team of 5 people, spend 6 months with it, and you leave because you quit because it doesn't make any sense. Like you're building something that's never going to be launched. Yeah. And I don't know if it has been launched. I have no idea. So yeah, with CubeSats it becomes easier, and it's going to become cheaper and cheaper. The satellites will get more. They're actually going to become bigger because when the electronics gets cheaper, you want to build more functional satellites. Yeah. It's going to be a little bit bigger. Yeah, cool. And actually, on the CubeSat side, did anyone watch the this idea, the Mars landing yesterday around midnight? Yeah.
Yeah. I checked the highlights.
Yeah. So maybe you've seen it in a news today, right? So what happened is that this thing that costed almost $1 billion landed on Mars, another successful landing by NASA. It's really cool, exciting, but we in commercial space were not excited about this stuff. We were excited about those satellites. So this is, again, it's the same type of satellite. If you look, this is called 3U because it has 3 standard units. This satellite is called 6U, so it's 3 by 2, so it's 6U CubeSat. And yes, it was developed in NASA, in Jet Propulsion Lab. Yes, it was super expensive for CubeSat. It costed like $19 million for 2 satellites. But today was a big revolution for the commercial space because they always said that if that stuff, commercial off-the-shelf electronic, worked in the low Earth environment, so like around us, can we actually send it deep into space? Can we send it to the moon? Can we send it to Mars? What will happen there? And of course, none of the investors wanted to risk their money to test it. Why would you want to send a satellite that will go somewhere and there's no clients, no customers, right? And then just risk that. And so NASA did that project. They launched 2 CubeSats together with this stuff. So that stuff entered the atmosphere and landed, and those 2 CubeSats were just passing by the Mars. They didn't have any propulsion engine or propulsion system engine to slow down and enter the atmosphere. They were just flying through the Mars orbit, and then they had one function. They needed to connect to the lander while it was descending in the atmosphere, and then send the telemetry and the signals and pictures from this stuff back to Earth. And it was redundant. So, I mean, they had another big expensive orbiter doing the same stuff, but they said, what if we could just send those satellites for a fraction of the cost and do the same function in different fashion? And it worked. It worked, so they proved that, again, commercial off-the-shelf electronics, no other stuff was added, worked in deep space environment, and I think that a lot of investors will now give a green light to some crazy projects on asteroid prospecting. Cheap electronics can work in deep space. So that was a big moment today. Cool. And so we talked about how the satellites got cheaper. Now let's see. I'm just going to illustrate that what happened with the cost of launch. So here you can see that even 7-8 years ago, Russia dominated the whole market. So we had this cheap Soviet era launch vehicles being launched from Baikonur from Kazakhstan, and because of the low cost of labor in Russia and Kazakhstan, they were priced really aggressively. So the market was just Russia and Europe. So Europe launch vehicles were also subsidized by the government, so they were just this two. And then from 2018, there was a new player called SpaceX, and then SpaceX started to basically, so it's here, yeah. They started to grow, and as of today, Russia is almost gone from the commercial space. So there's Europe, which is still being subsidized, and there's just SpaceX, and no one really else. And you can see that why they were able to do that is because their cost of launch per kilogram has beaten everyone. So they've beaten the Indian rockets, which are also subsidized, Chinese, Russians, and all the others. So they're now, and they're working in further to reduce that. So those are the two drivers of the whole industry. So you need to get the revenues from customers, you need to launch satellites. They became much cheaper, and to get into orbit, you have to buy rockets. And rockets became that much cheaper. So these two things contributed to the whole revolution here.
Sorry, where does Rocket Labs stand on this graph? Like, would they belong to these players or?
So Rocket Lab is New Zealand company, founded by a New Zealand-based entrepreneur, and then he created a US company for the US market.
But they do the operations in.
Yes. And he said, I want to, so if SpaceX was the first company to create big rocket using private money to launch big satellites. Peter Beck, who is the founder of Rocket Lab, said, I want to build a private company with a small rocket to launch small satellites. Because that was the initial idea of SpaceX as well, but when they created a small rocket, market was not there. So there was no Planet Labs and other companies to become their customers, so they just said, we want to build, we'll skip the small rockets, we'll build a bigger one. So a decade later, Peter said that, okay, SpaceX said they want to do that a decade ago. Now there's a market, and I'm going to fill that niche. So they've done their first fully commercial launch a month ago. So they just started, but it's a really exciting company. So they're going to, next year, they're going to launch every month. So they built already 20 rockets in their factory, pre-manufactured, and they're going to launch them like every couple of weeks from New Zealand and then from the United States. So yeah, it's a really good example, but if you look at the graphics of the number of launches, they will start contributing there. If you look at the graphics showing the amount of the payload lifted in terms of kg and tons, they will be that low because the market is different. The market is small satellites that need to get to space really quickly. But yeah, it's a good example.
Just one thing about that is SpaceX also gonna like send around 12,000 satellites, I think, in the same range.
Yeah. But it is stuff that they're going to launch their own satellites.
Yeah.
So it's not a third-party customer. So it's their internal customer. So there's their own satellites. But yeah, you're right.
I have a question. Correct me if I'm wrong, but did SpaceX kind of revolutionize the reducing cost of launching and just building rockets because they were so adamant about building everything in-house instead of buying anything from other companies?
So it's vertical integration, as we call it, and reusability.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. Because they there have been some startups in Russia that they said, let's build a cheaper rocket, and they started, going to all government-owned factories and saying, can you do that part, and then we'll do some innovation and we'll do a cheap rocket. Didn't work out. So what SpaceX did, they just raised money and they said, we're going to build everything from scratch. So they they buy their sheets of aluminum and then they're folding them, melting them to make the actual rockets. So yeah, they're doing everything vertically. Yeah, that's right. Oh, so yeah, let's go and see what space market looks like today. So this is the official graphics from one of the venture capital firms, and they sort of say that there are companies that are building hardware and satellites, there are companies that are building the rockets to launch the satellites, there are data analytics companies that analyze data being beamed down by the satellites that will launch these rockets, there are ground antennas that download the data from the satellites and storage and analysis, products, etc. And that is related to all those applications, but I really don't think in that fashion. So when I started to look at the space industry at whole, I needed some simple concept to put in my mind, right? So I came up, and I still live in that kind of understanding of the reality. I came up with this. So for me, space industry is satellites, which is basically computers. So they have, processors and batteries and wires and all this stuff. So this is the stuff that you build in the lab. You have rockets to launch the satellites. You have antennas to download information from the satellites that were launching rockets. And you have the software to analyze the data that was downloaded by the antennas. And that's it. So I don't want to overcomplicate it. For me, it's just this. Because that stuff is too complex. So yeah, and then they call it upstream, downstream. So upstream is hardware, downstream is data and products. So analysis of the data, business data that you can derive from the signals that were beamed down from space. So yeah, and all those companies that are here, I divide them into two parts, upstream or downstream, just to keep it simple. So those are maybe 50 main startups that are doing something in the space tech. So you can see satellite companies, different parts of electronic software. Those are private launch companies. So you can see that there are maybe 20 of them, but the latest report shows that there are currently 110 private companies building the rocket systems in the world, and it's crazy. So if you look at the rocket lab, there are 100 more rocket labs in the world right now. It's really crazy. And then yeah, the satellites, they even mentioned that companies like Uber and CityMapper also belong to the space ecosystem because they rely on GPS and everything. So I don't believe in that, but it's a good indication of how venture capitalists think about all that stuff. So yeah, those are the companies to watch for if you want to know what's basically what private companies are doing and where the venture capitalist money are being put into. And then yeah.
Sorry, just a quick one.
Sure.
Where does space tourism like Virgin Galactic fall into that?
Let's try to find them here. It's a good question.
It's not there.
I think it's not
It's
here.
launchers, probably.
Yeah, so I think they're not here, and they're not here for a reason. Yeah, they're not here for a reason because there are only two companies that are working on that concept. There is another one in Eastern Europe, but they're not really publicly saying what they're doing. But yeah, Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin are the ones who are working on the space tourism market, and those are they are owned by this billionaire individuals, and they are yet to start their commercial operation. So with Virgin Galactic, they sort of sold a few hundred of tickets back in 2004 or 5 with a promise to start the commercial operation by 2007. And then they had a lot of technical problems that were derived from their design, actual design. It was not a technical problem, it was the problem of design of the whole hardware. And then they are still trying to start the commercial operations this year, maybe later next year. So yeah, with Blue Origin, they also promised to start the commercial operations next year. So it's really not that exciting. I mean, it is exciting. If you go to YouTube and just type in the Blue Origin launch, they actually created the actual video of the whole 16 minutes launch, and you can try to imagine how it will feel like inside of a capsule. But yeah, I'm still skeptic about whether customers will actually pay $250,000 for a 16 minutes launch to edge of space. So it's not as big space as it is, it's just 100 kilometers. Yes, you'll experience weightlessness, but only for 5 minutes. So yeah, people are skeptic. But yeah, it's a promising thing, but people are there not for the money. They are there basically to educate people about space and get that space experience to a lot of people. So they're not trying to create a sustainable business model that will generate a profit or return for the investors with them. So maybe this is the reason why we don't see it here on this map. Yeah.
And fast forward, where do you see yourself?
So we work in this segment, so launchers, and so we're in upstream. So we connect space hardware companies with launchers. So we're a marketplace, right? Marketplace that helps these companies being launched on this company. So those are my pilot projects and my clients here, and on the supply chain, and then those are my customers on satellite stuff. So yeah.
The VC that I guess, is this your own or is this VC created?
This is VC created. Okay. You can see their watermark here.
Yeah. So would they put you at marketplace or somewhere else? Or you don't fit in this grid?
We'll be in launch services. Those are my competitors. These 4 companies, 5 companies. This is my client, this is my competitors, yeah. And all the accelerators, famous accelerators in the world, Silicon Valley and in Europe, are already accepting a lot of and funding a lot of companies from the space sector. So all of these 4, so all these 3 accelerators, and Sequoia Capital is the one who used traditionally to invest into the IT sector, and now heavily investing in satellites and rockets and space software and et cetera, et cetera. And so yeah, Y Combinator has funded a few rocket companies. Sequoia Capital funded the rocket company. So it means that all community that revolves around these accelerators are now also eligible to tap the space market, because their supporting parties from the accelerators are helping them to get contracts and funding from that community of space. So it shows that the market is mature enough to attract even traditional investors from the IT sector, from Silicon Valley to this industry as well. Cool. Let's talk about, as I promised, intersections with the global trends. So for every hot topic such as VR, AI, or machine learning, blockchain, edit manufacturing, sharing economy, or open source, I can give you not even one example. And those are, I'm not naming the companies because of the NDAs, but those are real companies that are doing that type of product. So, a Canadian company actually creating a VR, they have put a VR camera, so this 360 camera, VR camera, on a rover that they are going to put on the moon by 2021, and they will sell this as a service to the universities around the world to let students experience driving of the rover, the real rover on the lunar surface, using the VR headset. This is crazy. And they fund this, they're real. I've been to their lab. They have a room like this with the moon regolith, so like this simulation of moon regolith, and the actual rover go in there, and they can give you the VR headset. It's so crazy. Yeah, and with the AI, so we have not only that analysis of automatic analysis of the space data and the space images, but also stuff like autonomous satellite servicing, where we can refuel the satellites, we can build bigger satellites using the satellite servicing technology. With the machine learning, we can do, as explained, if you feed to the software all the images that are being captured in from different satellites, then there are algorithms being developed that can give you the trade signals. They can tell you what changes in ship traffic around Singapore or around Qatar means. They can give you that insights of what's going on there, but just analyzing the images that are being taken every few hours. Blockchain. Number of companies that are building the cloud storage on the satellites. So there's a company called SpaceX who are creating the similar technology like Amazon Web Services, using the distributed storage on the satellites, launching also small satellites in dozens to space. And they're saying now you can store your data on the satellites that are revolving around the globe on the ridiculous speed. I don't know why, but they're just doing that. Yeah, even the open source. So there's a Linux operating system for small satellites that is being developed commercially in Europe. So and people that work there, none of them are aerospace engineers, none of them are scientists. They're just normal IT people, normal software guys and software developers who just got excited about space and decided to create basically a product for that emerging industry, and it's super cool. So I can see that a lot of people are joining the startups having no backgrounds in aerospace engineering, and it's really cool. Yeah. Then about the planet. So there's a short video, like 30 seconds, that shows how this satellites
doves shot out from the International Space Station.
So they're the size of a shoebox,
Small,
30
less
centimeters.
than a foot long, but the telescope cameras are powerful. This is what we get. High-resolution photos of anything on the Earth's surface, West Texas oil fields to Chinese power plants in Xinjiang, and Argentine lithium mines, typically downloadable in 1 to 2 hours.
Yeah. And this was one example of what people are investing into in this, called the small sat installations. Another good example is what SpaceX is doing with Starlink. So Starlink is going to be a constellation of up to 12,000 satellites. They're going to be slightly bigger. They're going to be the size of a washing machine and weighing like 350 kg. And they're going to compete with 5G. So we all know that all the mobile operators of the world, they're now upgrading their hardware to give us better speeds and upgrade from 4G to 5G. And for that, they will need to install new hardware on every cell tower in the world, right? So companies like SpaceX, what they're doing, they're saying, what if those 5G cell towers were around you at every particular moment, right? So now we have GPS satellites, and all our phones, they have in their visibility around 10 to 15 GPS satellites. But what if every office, phone, village had an access to 80 to 90 satellites at every point of time? All those satellites are interconnected with the laser links, so they can provide the internet globally, and they will completely substitute all those fiber optic cables that we have now on the ocean, in the oceans and between the countries. So that will be a complete infrastructure of the internet just beamed through the satellites. And I was quite skeptical about that because I thought it's going to take forever to beam it up through the antenna, take it through the satellites, and beam it down. And then they launched test satellites this year, 2 of them, and they showed that the connection between the continents is going to be 40% faster than a direct fiber cable, because they're using laser links, and it's light traveling through the vacuum, and in a fiber cable you have light traveling through the glass, so it's slower, and there it's faster. And if that goes live, and that's going to be live in the next couple of years, then we will have, so imagine you will have a 5G connection, so 10 times faster than we have now with the phone, literally everywhere. So if you leave Dubai and you go to the desert, it's going to be there. If you go to Africa really deep, it's going to be there. And it's not changing. It's always there. So if you go inside the building, it's there. If you drive the car and you have an autonomous car, and you need to have that connection. So the thing is, autonomous cars, if they come in, they cannot survive with a 4G. So because if you leave Dubai and you're downgraded from 4G to 3G and 3G to the edge, your car is gonna stop, right? it's not gonna be autonomous. It's gonna say, thank you, we will go. So yeah, this stuff is interconnected. So same private equity firms that invest in autonomous cars, they also invest in Starlink or their competitors.
So in space, I guess we don't have borders there yet. And so it leads me to thinking that with companies going to space, there might be a conflict of interest from company to company, country to country,
yep.
with what they're doing. And so where does that leave us in terms of who's regulating all this, and how are we coming to a inclusive agreement of how everything should be regulated? I mean, I see this going to like space wars, and I don't know, like.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good question. So there are a number of international space treaties that were executed during the Cold War that governs that military stuff and basic non-interference in space. So it is there, and it gives you the foundation for non-militarization of space and do no harm approach. And then, because of all of that stuff, there is a number of debates on how to do they call it space debris problem, right? So this stuff is designed in a way that they will not collide, but if there's one collision, it will produce, a few thousand of projectiles that you cannot track, right? And then, if any of you have seen the movie called, yes. Gravity.
Yeah.
Who said that? Yes. So gravity is a good illustration of the space debris problem of how bad it can get. So it basically says that if there's one collision, it can produce another collision and grow exponentially, and
It's like a chain reaction. You won't know until the third year.
yes, and we won't have any excess
By the time you
space.
know, you can't stop.
Yes, exactly. that's the bad one. So yeah, there's a number of international groups. One of them is ITU that you mentioned, that's trying to govern all those international players and prevent the accidents like the one that happened in China in 2008 or 9. So when companies like SpaceX were really excited about launching satellites, and there was a lot of influx of venture capital money and a lot of talks about space debris and everything back in 2009, the Chinese government launched a satellite and then tested the ground-to-space rocket missile to basically destroy their own satellite. And they produced 9,000 projectiles still there in orbit. And the America said, maybe we have to talk to China first, before we decide something internally. Maybe we have to include Chinese companies as well. So yeah, there's a lot of debates and there's a lot of stuff going on, but so far it's all going fine. So there are no rogue satellites or no problems so far, but people get ready. So there's, on that map of startups, there's one startup that's in the last 6 months raised $35 million. They called Astrolabs, and they developed a technology to track the satellites, just tracking the satellites. They said space debris is going to become a problem. We'll create a service to track whatever is being launched, regardless of whether that stuff is registered or not. If it's a satellite or product collision or whatever. So yeah, it's a big problem, and it's a niche for innovation. So there's a lot of innovation coming there as well.
Can I have one comment?
Sure.
Here? ITU had a 2 weeks back a conference here in Dubai.
Okay.
It was a big conference internationally.
Didn't know that.
Shows the board members.
Mm-hmm.
And I had one of the guests was actually, I knew that person for a long time. And she was explaining me about this problem, especially this thing, like space debris.
Yep.
And I think this is kind of on the verge of kind of uncontrollable level, and it's getting very closer to that.
Yep.
So this problem, I think it's going to be much bigger, because as you see, so many startups trying to compete on that level, and everything should go from the approval of ITU if they want to launch. But there are companies who are launching without any approval.
Yes.
Like there was one U.S. company which,
Sure.
yeah,
Yes.
they did, and then of course they got banned. But again, they got some kind of permission, but it was a mess.
Yes.
So these things are already happening, and it's going to happen
Yes.
in a more scale, in a bigger scale level. So
Yes.
I mean, she was telling me that this is a big problem, and there are even such technologies that private companies are using for harming, or I would say, for the bad intentions.
Yes.
You know, and because this is a satellite in the end of the day,
Yes.
and you can use for any intention, and then private companies are trying to launch without permission, just like what China did, or
Yes.
and a couple of other countries have done this before.
That's
So
right.
yeah, just one thing that I want to add, because what you told me, that this is about to be a big problem, and they don't even know how to solve that yet. So it's very.
I think what's really important and what really bothers people inside the industry, that when this kind of problem leaves the space community and gets to the global media, they're saying, like, stop doing that because it will pollute those orbits, and this thing's going to fall on our heads, destroy towns and everything. And what really is important here is to educate people about the actual physics of it, right? And there are basically two things that we all have to know why we're reading all those reports and everything. So first thing is that anything that you launch to space, if it gets launched to the orbit which is below 500 kilometers, it will eventually burn up the atmosphere. It will not stay there. It's physics. Because there's still thin atmosphere, and because of the drag, this thing will go down. And it means that yes, space debris is a problem, but if it all happens below 500 kilometers, which is 95%, 99% of all the commercial startups out there, it's going to burn down in 3 years maximum. Second thing is that anything less than the size of this room will burn to zero, to nothing. So nothing will fall to our heads and hit our homes and everything. Yeah, so this is two basic concepts that we have to understand. Why we're reading all those reports about our nightmarish future of space debris falling in our heads and everything. Yeah, but you're right. In terms of sustainability of this economy, it's really important. You're right. Yeah.
Does it create pollution,
Which kind of pollution?
like in the air, or the atmosphere, or not?
Rockets do pollute themselves, especially the old ones, because they use the toxic fuels and everything. So especially in Kazakhstan and China, they are launching toxic rockets over villages and over towns, and they pollute a lot. The air, the atmosphere, everything around. But the companies like Blue Origin and SpaceX, and so all the new generation technologies, they use the natural gas, methane, so all the clean propellants, and they're not polluting at all. But all the ones, yeah.
Yeah, and what about the stuff that falls back into the atmosphere and burns, or it's not really, it doesn't really have
It burns, but it's really small, so it doesn't contribute to anything. So if you look at the rockets, the big rocket can burn 4 tons of fuel a second, and it burns for like 200 seconds. So you can imagine it can burn a lot of stuff. It's like consider 20 Boeing jets being launched in one single launch, right? So it hurts, but with the satellites and all this stuff, it doesn't really matter at all. Like, we have much more meteorites entering the atmosphere every night than we have satellites now on orbit or at before. So you have all those meteor showers in August, right, which you can see. So that stuff doesn't pollute, right? Doesn't hurt, doesn't pollute. Any more questions here? Cool. So, a few words about UAE. So, in November, there was a launch of the first satellite that was built here in Dubai. So, there is a modern satellite factory behind Rashidiyah. I don't remember the exact name, but it's there. It's even open to the public on some days. So I invite you just go to the website of International Space Center or like space.gov.ae and just sign up for the visit there. It's really exciting. So you can see that there are local Emirati engineers who assembled the satellites, and they launched that on a Japanese rocket just a month ago. They're building those educational students CubeSats everywhere, in Sharjah, in Abu Dhabi, in Dubai, of course, in Al Ain as well. So this is big. So they are now launching at least one satellite a year, and it's going to be bigger. And there's space mission design master program in Abu Dhabi, in Masdar Institute. There's a lot of stuff on education here. We have Mars probe mission. So this is an actual Mars orbiter that's going to be, it's being built here in UAE. It's going to be launched on the Japanese rocket as well, and that will be launched in 2020. That's a big one. It's a actual contribution of UAE to the international scientific community, and this is, I think, how they got permission to host the biggest space conference here in Dubai in 2020. So they contributed to the international science, and then the international community said, okay, maybe we'll allow you to host the biggest events in 2020. And they won that. They won the competition last year. And so imagine in 2020, first week of October, so from 1st to 5th October of 2020, at least 8,000 space professionals, investors, entrepreneurs will come here to the Dubai Port Center, and it's going to be massive. So SpaceX, Blue Origin, head of European space agency, head of NASA will all come here, and there's a lot of preparation inside UAE governments to host that event and to forge the public-private partnerships here, maybe to create the Mars Simulation City in Rajni as well. That we do in the future that you can see on the Sheikh Road in Dubai Food Center. They will also have a space zone there, and yeah, the free zone that I mentioned in the Al Maktoum airport. So this is the right time. Like when I was considering with some other companies whether to just leave UAE and go to Silicon Valley and be there, we realized that you have a choice of either becoming a fish in a big pond, right, or a big fish in a very small pond. So there's only a handful of space companies here, and we know there's going to be a first move advantage, right? So you can get your first license here. It's going to be, you will get all the attention from the local government investors, clients, etc., etc. You can capture that Middle East, Asia, and African market here. I think it's really right, and of course you have no tax environment here. So I think it's really a great place to start something in software stuff, satellite stuff. I don't know, rocket stuff. I will not advise to go there because there's a lot of competition there and it's really hard. But yeah, anything that can service that market I've shown before can be and should be hosted here. That's my genuine belief. And yeah, so yeah, that's what I wanted to say, like how to get involved, right? So I think if we look at Dubai is, I can only compare Dubai with Singapore. So Singapore was able to do all of that in terms of the public-private partnership and funding the investor community a few years ago. So it has a stronger position in Asia than Dubai, but Dubai is really committed. UAE is really committed to creating space economy here, and they use the right model, whereas in countries like Saudi Arabia, it's more government-backed. So they completely like saying that we have to train our engineers, and we will not allow foreign capital to like do something in Saudi Arabia. Here in UAE, it's much more different. They're saying, our population is 10% of the whole population. We need that foreign capital. We need the foreign companies to come here. We have to offer them something like tax-free or simple licensing or anything. So they kind of have this clarity in their mind that they have to rely on the foreign investments. And I can feel that in the next 24 months, there's going to be a lot of announcements of, again, startups, free zones, initiatives, etc., etc. You can already see it now. So I was invited to pitch at Andrey. They had the big zone for space startups, and they invite people from around the world, so not only from Middle East, but from around the world, and there were like 20 companies from the space sector, and they had the cash prizes and like accelerator program by UAE governments here in Dubai, and that's only a start. So if you look at their website, they have a lot of existing initiatives there. They have so they have prizes for small cell technicians, for educational projects, for CubeSats, for software. There's a lot of stuff going on, and yeah, I invite you all to go there and check. Maybe there's something for you guys, or for your friends, or for anyone who can get excited about that. Any questions?
So you spoke a lot about how to get involved, I guess, in the short term. But how about like in the long term, in terms of inhabiting Mars? What's going on in that arena of things? Like, what are people investing in businesses to inhabit Mars?
So I think if we talk realistically means that let's look at the things that are backed by money, right? Let's talk about things that were being funded, or were funded and failed, and let's take that as the most distant we can get at the moment. Because let's not talk about the science fiction. Let's talk about what people are actually working on, right? And let's make a border between the projects of philanthropy, like the fund that was created by Mark Zuckerberg and Yuri Milner in Russia. They committed $100 million on creating a tiny spacecraft to send to another star, right? Nice. They hired like 50 people and they gave them $100 million, and they're doing that, and that's super exciting. But that's not something that will get us somewhere, right? It's a project of lifetime. It's like their investment in the future. It will employ some kind of people, like employ a few dozen people, but will not get us somewhere. So let's do this border, and let's look at what companies were created behind the border that got traditional private equity or venture capital funding, and they were up to something. So I guess the idea that was closest to the creating some habitats on another planets or another bodies or in space was the asteroid mining. And so asteroid mining is something that was created a few years ago, maybe 2012, 13, 14. And there were and still are a number of companies like Deep Space Industries and Planet Resources. And they basically said, what if these satellites, right, were launched towards the asteroid? What if they could take the pictures of the asteroids? What if they were to confirm that there are precious metals and water and everything? And what if there was a way how to basically mine that stuff, like deliver it back to Earth, and then sell it in the global markets, right? Or what if we could use that material to build something, not habited, but some manufacturing plant or something? And because of that influx of the venture capital money, they got funding. So Planet Resources got funding from Luxembourg government for 22 million euros. Besides that, they got, I guess, another 20 from the venture capital firms. That all happens in 2016. And Deep Space Industries also got some funding, and they started to build the imaging satellites that they want to launch towards asteroids. And then, long story cut short, Planet Resources went bankrupt this year. Is that?
There is updated one. The blockchain company bought them recently.
Yeah, and it was a purchase of assets. So they auctioned off chairs, laptops, some CNC machines, and all that stuff. So they bought the assets. And deep tech industries almost went bankrupt. They fired the CEOs and all the founding members, and they started to manufacture thrusters, so engines for the satellites. And that whole branch of the investment just died. Why? Because they couldn't. So the problem there is that once you accept any outside money, you have to design the business model that will start generating some, not even profits, but some revenues, right, in the near future. That means 7 to 8 years. We don't know, it's hard to predict even stuff like, iPhone app, right? You can't say what you'll be doing in the next 36 months, right? If you're saying, okay, draw me a business model, design me a business model that will start getting revenue for me in the next 5 to 7 years. Then you have the asteroids, and you have the satellites, right? So these two companies tried, right? So Planetary Resources, why they failed is because I've seen their pitch deck. They said, we're going to launch satellites. We're going to build hyperspectral, super fancy camera that will allow us to prospect for resources in asteroid. While we're doing that, and while we are securing funding for actual camera to launch the asteroid, let's launch it to 500 kilometers, and then take the images of Earth in super good quality and sell them to that market that already exists, right? And then they got the funding from Luxembourg government. Luxembourg government said, I'm going to give you all the money you need, but just launch same satellites to asteroid. Do that, because we want public to get excited, and we have got the money for that. So they gave them money. They said, do it as soon as you can. They launched 2 satellites. They didn't turn off. They just failed to launch them. And Luxembourg government said, okay, you failed, no more money. And it says the company went bankrupt. So it sort of, it was forced to pivot from A to B, and that didn't happen, and they didn't have any backup, so it all failed. Yeah.
One question: How about this Japanese
iSpace?
No, Rugu, asteroid Rugu. They landed on that, and I mean, I think there is hope still.
So those are government missions.
Yeah.
So they cost 500 million to $1 billion, and those are really exciting. But those are government ones, so they don't have any business model about them. So so I have a lot of stuff I can talk about. Really a lot of stuff. I know it's already been like good almost 90 minutes, so I'm fine to stay with anyone who wants to talk more or to explore some other stuff. But for the rest, thank you so much for coming, and yeah.
So, if I understand correctly, then you are planning to do other meetups like this with similar, like different topics.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, I need some guidance
On what?
on what topics needs to be covered, and yeah, we can do more software stuff. We can do more exciting stuff like SpaceX or Blue Origin. I'm open to any suggestions. Like in other countries, what they do, they even give it for the beer when there's the launch.
Yeah.
It can become that crazy. But yeah, all what we can do is, I just need suggestions. So I'm here in this space till May, next couple of months, and my plan is to host this either to the broader community like this, or with the folks from governments and some space companies here, to make it like more specialty kind of thing, more technical. So I'm not tried this. In a month I'm going to try that, and we'll see what goes. Yeah.
It would be interesting if you touch upon the data that they're using and what ideas they're coming up with, like how they're regulating the data.
Yeah, it's a good topic. Cool. Yeah, so my details are here. So send me those, like on the Facebook or here. Just send me the question that you have, or add me on LinkedIn and just send me your inquiries, questions, and as soon as we, I'm missing 7 here. Yeah, as soon as we get enough questions, I'm ready to announce another meetup and move into something.
That was really insightful, really interesting.
Yeah.
Sounds
Thanks a
good.
lot.
Thank you.
Thank you
Yeah.
so much for your time.